On a stormy night in Chicago, a devoted single father opened his door to a stranger. Just one night, just one act of kindness. He never imagined that this decision would unleash a chain of events capable of tearing his entire world apart. Marcus Johnson was a man who lived with discipline, sacrifice, and love for his little girl. But within days of sheltering the young woman, his quiet life spiraled into chaos. His career threatened, his finances destroyed, even his custody of his daughter put on the line. Why? Because the stranger he helped wasn't who she claimed to be. Behind her silence and fear lay a truth tied to unimaginable wealth, power, and revenge. And when her secret came out, Marcus found himself facing an enemy most men would never survive. So the question is, how far can one father's courage go against a millionaire's wrath? Before we start, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Marcus Johnson was a man whose life revolved around two things: his daughter and his work. At 42 years old, he had built his world on discipline, structure, and sacrifice. By day, he was a father to 7-year-old Layla, a bright little girl with wide eyes and a laugh that could light up even the grayest of Chicago mornings. By night, he worked long, grueling shifts as a nurse in a busy city hospital. His co-workers often wondered how he managed to juggle it all: endless patients, unpredictable emergencies, and the quiet but demanding needs of raising a child on his own. The truth was simple: Marcus had no choice. After Layla's mother left when she was just a baby, Marcus vowed that nothing and no one would ever come between him and his daughter. Their life wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Each morning, Marcus would prepare Layla's breakfast before walking her to school. Even on the days when exhaustion clung to his body like a weight, he believed in routine, in showing his daughter that stability mattered more than wealth. Their modest apartment carried the warmth of family, not luxury. Hand-drawn pictures taped to the fridge, a second-hand couch worn at the edges, and a small bookshelf filled with Layla's favorite stories. To Marcus, these little things weren't shortcomings. They were proof of love, proof of survival, and proof that even without riches, their lives had meaning. But beneath his calm surface, Marcus carried a heavy truth. The world didn't always look kindly on men like him. As a black single father, he often felt the sharp edge of judgment. Teachers at Layla's school sometimes treated him with quiet suspicion, as if a man alone couldn't possibly raise a child with care. Strangers gave looks that suggested doubt rather than respect. Even at work, Marcus had learned to stay quiet in the face of subtle remarks and the invisible weight of stereotypes. He endured it, never allowing bitterness to reach Layla's innocent heart. Instead, he taught her about kindness, resilience, and the strength to rise above ignorance. Still, the challenges were there. The endless night shifts drained him. Bills often hovered too close to being overdue. And yet, Marcus kept moving forward, determined to give Layla a future brighter than his own past had been. That was his mission, his purpose, and his reason for breathing. 3 weeks before his world collapsed, life seemed deceptively ordinary. A storm rolled into the city one late evening, winds howling and rain striking the pavement with relentless force. Marcus, driving home from another shift, gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind already on Layla waiting at home. He had learned to navigate these nights: work, fatigue, parenting, all while ignoring the gnawing thought that one small misstep could unravel everything he had built. It was on this night, through the blur of rain on his windshield, that he first noticed her. A young woman, drenched and trembling, standing alone on the side of the road. She had no umbrella, no jacket, no belongings. Just a look of fear and exhaustion written across her face. Marcus slowed down, debating with himself. He had been taught to be cautious, to protect both himself and his daughter from unnecessary risk. Yet compassion pulled stronger than caution. He rolled down his window, asked if she was all right, and heard a story that seemed simple enough. She had lost her phone, her wallet, everything in the chaos of the storm. She introduced herself as Emily Carter. No family nearby, no friends she could call. Just another unfortunate soul caught in life's unpredictable cruelty. Marcus knew he couldn't leave her there. Not in that weather, not with danger lurking in the shadows of the city streets. He made a decision that would change everything. He offered her shelter. One night, just until the storm passed. When he brought her into his modest home, Layla peeked curiously from her bedroom door. To a child, Emily seemed like a mystery, an unexpected guest in their small world. Marcus reassured his daughter that it was only temporary, that kindness sometimes meant opening your door when someone had nowhere else to turn. At first, Emily kept her distance. She spoke little, offering no details about where she had come from or who she really was. She helped with small chores, shared quiet meals, and blended into their routine like a shadow passing through. To Marcus, she appeared harmless, fragile, even a young woman down on her luck. But as the days stretched into nearly 2 weeks, Marcus began to feel the strangeness of it. Why had she not tried to contact anyone? Why did she avoid questions about her past? Why did she always appear restless, as if hiding from something unseen? He pushed these doubts aside, reminding himself that compassion was rarely convenient and that sometimes people simply needed space to heal. What Marcus did not know, what he could not possibly imagine, was that this woman's presence would soon drag him into a storm far more dangerous than the one outside his car window that night. Behind Emily's silence was a secret tied to unimaginable power, a secret that would soon put Marcus and his little girl in the direct path of a ruthless enemy. And for a man who had spent his life surviving on discipline and sacrifice, nothing could prepare him for the storm about to come. The first signs of trouble came quietly, almost too subtle to notice. Emily, or Sophia, as Marcus would one day discover, disappeared as suddenly as she had arrived. One morning, Marcus found nothing but a short handwritten note on the kitchen table. "Thank you for everything. I'll never forget your kindness." That was it. No phone number, no explanation, no goodbye. Marcus felt a brief pang of worry, but life demanded his attention. He folded the note, tucked it away, and moved on with his routine. But only days later, his phone rang with a voice that froze his blood. On the other end was Charles Langford, a name Marcus didn't recognize yet, but a tone he would never forget. Sharp, accusing, threatening. The man claimed Marcus had manipulated his daughter, used her, even kidnapped her. Before Marcus could explain, the voice cut him off with a chilling promise. "I will destroy you. You'll lose everything." At first, Marcus brushed it off as a misunderstanding, an overprotective father lashing out. But soon, the threats became reality. Strange complaints began arriving at the hospital where Marcus worked. Anonymous letters accused him of negligence, and whispers spread about misconduct. Supervisors who once trusted him now watched with suspicion. Then came the financial blows. His bank accounts mysteriously frozen, bills bouncing back unpaid. Even Layla's school fees, something Marcus never missed, were suddenly blocked. Each day revealed a new crack in the life he had worked so hard to build. His health insurance was canceled without notice, and his mortgage payments were interrupted. Marcus felt like a man standing on a collapsing bridge, each plank falling away under his feet. He knew this was no coincidence. Someone was pulling strings, and the power behind it was terrifying. Marcus tried to shield Layla from the storm. He kept her routine intact, walked her to school, read her bedtime stories, all while hiding his growing fear. But children sense more than adults realize. She noticed the tension in his voice, the way he checked the locks twice each night, the exhaustion in his eyes. Marcus's worst nightmare was unfolding. His ability to protect his daughter was slipping away. The weight of racism pressed heavily on him during this time. Marcus knew that as a black man standing alone, the system was not built to believe him. Accusations carried more weight, suspicion came easier, and sympathy was in short supply. He remembered the subtle doubts teachers had once shown, the dismissive glances from hospital administrators. Now, with Charles Langford, a wealthy, powerful white businessman, pointing fingers, Marcus understood the scale of the battle he faced. It wasn't just about one man's anger. It was about the imbalance of power, about how easily truth could be twisted when money and privilege stood against him. But Marcus was not the kind of man to crumble. Instead of retreating, he began documenting everything. Every phone call, every threatening message, every suspicious letter, he recorded it all. His medical training had taught him the value of meticulous notes, and now that discipline became his shield. If they wanted to paint him as a criminal, he would counter with evidence, precision, and truth. Still, the pressure mounted. Friends began to distance themselves, fearful of being caught in the crossfire. Neighbors whispered. At the hospital, some colleagues treated him like a liability. Marcus felt the walls closing in, isolation pressing harder than ever. Yet, in that isolation, a spark of determination burned. That spark grew when he crossed paths with Dr. Laura Hernandez, a civil rights attorney known for taking on cases others avoided. When Marcus explained his ordeal, Laura didn't dismiss him. She listened, then revealed something chilling. Charles Langford had a long history of using his wealth to silence, intimidate, and destroy. Teachers, employees, and even ordinary citizens had faced his wrath. Most lost everything. Few fought back. But Marcus was different. He had evidence. He had resilience. And he had something Langford could never buy, truth on his side. While Marcus and Laura prepared, an unexpected ally emerged. Emily, no Sophia, reached out in secret. Guilt weighed heavily on her. She confessed that she was the daughter of Charles Langford, heir to an empire worth nearly $150 million. She had run away from her father's suffocating control, desperate for freedom. Marcus's kindness had been the only moment of peace she had known. Now, knowing he was suffering because of her, she began collecting proof of her father's corruption. Sophia warned Marcus of her father's next move. Charles planned to plant drugs in Marcus's home, framing him as a criminal. With that, kidnapping charges would stick, custody of Layla would vanish, and Marcus's career would shatter permanently. The stakes could not be higher. Marcus had seen injustice before, but never so personal, never so threatening. A powerful millionaire wanted him erased, reduced to a stereotype, written off as another failed black father. But Marcus refused to let that happen. With Laura's guidance and Sophia's inside knowledge, Marcus prepared his home like a fortress of evidence. Hidden cameras, microphones, and GPS logs, all set to capture what was coming. He knew they were playing a dangerous game, but he also knew this was the only chance to expose the truth. And so the trap was set. Late one night, headlights appeared outside Marcus's modest home. Men stepped out, carrying bags and moving with quiet precision. They believed Marcus was asleep, unaware. They believed their power made them untouchable. But Marcus was watching, recording, waiting. The moment they entered his home, his heart pounded with fear, not just for himself, but for Layla sleeping peacefully in the next room. If they succeeded, his daughter's future would vanish in an instant. And as the men began planting evidence, Marcus realized the final battle was no longer about survival. It was about exposing the rotten core of power itself. What happened next would determine whether truth had any chance against money, privilege, and vengeance. The night had never felt so heavy. Marcus sat in the dim light of his living room, the glow from a hidden camera blinking faintly in the corner. His pulse thundered in his ears as shadows moved outside. Every instinct screamed at him to grab Layla, to run, to shield her from what was about to unfold. But running meant surrender. Running meant letting Charles Langford's lies win. And Marcus knew that if he allowed this trap to succeed, his daughter's future would be taken from him forever. The front door creaked open. Two men slipped inside, dressed in dark clothing, their steps silent but purposeful. They didn't knock, didn't announce themselves. They acted with the arrogance of men who believed the law was on their side. In their hands, Marcus saw the bags. He didn't need to guess what was inside. Drugs. Evidence that would transform him from a father into a criminal in the eyes of the world. His breath caught as one man crouched near the couch, sliding a package beneath the cushions. Another moved toward the kitchen, tucking smaller packets into drawers. Every second stretched like an eternity. Marcus's entire life. His job, his custody of Layla, his reputation, was being stolen before his eyes. But the cameras were rolling. The microphones were live. And unknown to the intruders, law enforcement had already been tipped off. Marcus clutched his phone, the emergency number ready, his hand trembling as he hit send. Moments later, flashing lights cut through the night. The men froze, panic replacing their smug confidence. Voices shouted from outside, commands, the sound of boots pounding against pavement. The intruders tried to run, but officers swarmed the house, catching them red-handed, the planted evidence still in their hands. Marcus exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Relief washed over him, but only for a moment, because this was bigger than two hired men. The real enemy was still untouched. And then, the phone rang. It was Charles Langford. His voice, calm and venomous, slithered through the speaker. "You think this changes anything? You think anyone will believe you over me?" He sneered. "You're nothing but a black man with a sob story. I'll crush you in court. I'll take your daughter, and when I'm done, you'll wish you had never been born." Marcus's chest tightened. For years, he had endured whispers, prejudice, and the subtle ways society doubted men like him. But this was the raw, unmasked voice of privilege and power, a man who believed his wealth made him untouchable. What Charles didn't know was that Sophia, his own daughter, had been recording. She had collected his threats, his emails, his manipulations. And now, as federal agents listened in, those words sealed his fate. The following days unfolded like a storm breaking open in full daylight. News outlets swarmed the story. Headlines screamed of a millionaire's conspiracy to frame an innocent father. Television cameras showed footage of Charles Langford being escorted from his glass office tower, his hands cuffed, his face twisted in rage. The same man who had once moved with untouchable authority now looked small, exposed, and powerless. For Marcus, the whirlwind was overwhelming. Reporters outside his home, calls from advocacy groups, strangers writing letters of support. Yet behind the noise, he carried the memory of every sleepless night, every moment he thought he might lose Layla, every fear that society's prejudices would erase his truth. It wasn't just about Charles anymore. It was about the countless times black fathers like Marcus were painted as dangerous, irresponsible, or unfit, simply because of who they were. Charles had tried to weaponize those stereotypes to destroy him, and for a moment the world almost believed it. But not this time. The courtroom became the final battleground. Marcus sat silently as his attorney presented the mountain of evidence. Recorded threats, video of the planted drugs, Sophia's testimony against her own father. Each piece was like a brick being torn from the wall Charles had built around his empire. Jurors watched, listened, and for once, the weight of money and privilege began to crumble under the sheer force of truth. Charles Langford, the man who believed he could ruin lives without consequence, was found guilty of conspiracy, extortion, and attempted framing. The sentence was 5 years in prison. 5 years stripped of wealth, of power, of the illusion that he was above the law. But for Marcus, the true victory wasn't the prison sentence. It was walking out of that courthouse with Layla's hand in his, free, vindicated, his dignity intact. It was proving that truth, even when buried under fear and prejudice, could still rise. And yet, even in victory, Marcus knew the scars would remain. He had stared into the face of systemic injustice, felt the crushing weight of being seen as guilty before being proven innocent. His story ended with justice, but how many others were silenced, destroyed, forgotten? The cameras captured Marcus standing tall, holding his daughter close. The world saw a father who refused to bow, who fought not just for himself but for every family threatened by the arrogance of unchecked power. But as the noise of the trial faded and Charles Langford disappeared behind prison walls, one question lingered, haunting and unshakable. If it hadn't been for the evidence, if it hadn't been for Sophia's courage, would anyone have believed Marcus at all? When the gavel fell and the verdict was read, Marcus Johnson's world shifted. For the first time in weeks, the weight pressing on his chest began to lift. Charles Langford, the man who had tried to erase him, was no longer untouchable. He was a convicted criminal, stripped of the power he had once wielded like a weapon. Cameras flashed, headlines swirled, and the nation watched as justice claimed one of the city's most powerful figures. But for Marcus, the victory was not about headlines. It was about walking through his front door that evening, looking into his daughter's eyes, and knowing she was safe. It was about showing Layla that her father had not only survived, but stood tall against a storm designed to break him. He had not been silenced. He had not been erased. He had fought and he had won. In the weeks that followed, Marcus's life transformed. With the support of Dr. Laura Hernandez, he founded the Marcus Johnson Center for Justice, a nonprofit dedicated to defending families targeted by abuse of power. What began as one man's nightmare became a movement. Other families, silenced by fear and poverty, found a voice in Marcus's story. Each case taken on by the center became a reminder that no one, no matter how wealthy or powerful, was above accountability. The impact rippled further. Sophia, determined to sever ties with her father's toxic legacy, stepped forward with courage. She testified openly, handing over every recording, every email, every piece of evidence she had hidden. And when it was done, she chose to rebuild her life not in the shadow of her family's empire, but in the light of justice. She invested part of her inheritance into foundations supporting vulnerable families and began studying law, determined to fight for the very people her father had tried to destroy. For Marcus, these victories carried a deeper meaning. He understood that his story was not unique. His survival was the exception, not the rule. Without evidence, without Sophia's courage, without a dedicated attorney, the outcome could have been very different. He could have been another statistic, another black father labeled a criminal, another child torn from a parent, another life written off by a system too quick to believe the worst. And that truth was the most painful of all. Because Marcus's battle may have ended in triumph, but countless others still fight in silence. How many fathers are accused without proof? How many families are destroyed because they lack the resources to defend themselves? How many lives are broken because power is allowed to bend justice? As Marcus stood before cameras and audiences at universities, telling his story, he never presented himself as a hero. He was simply a man who refused to be erased. His lectures weren't about his strength, but about the weakness of a system that almost failed him. He spoke of resilience, yes, but also of the need for change, accountability, and awareness. His story became more than a personal victory. It became a mirror held up to society, reflecting the uncomfortable truth about privilege, race, and justice in America. For Layla, the lessons were just as lasting. Once frightened by the chaos, she grew into confidence, knowing her father had stood his ground. She saw that kindness, the simple act of opening a door to a stranger, could spark change far greater than fear. Her childhood was forever shaped by the storm, but from it she learned strength, empathy, and hope. And for those who followed the story, who watched it unfold on screens and in headlines, Marcus's ordeal became a symbol, a reminder that injustice thrives when ordinary voices are silenced, but crumbles when truth refuses to back down. The story of Marcus Johnson is more than one man's fight. It is a warning and a call, a warning of how easily power can be abused and how quickly a life can be dismantled, but also a call to pay attention, to speak out, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Because if Marcus had not documented every detail, If Sophia had not found her courage, if Dr. Hernandez had not stepped in, would the world have ever known the truth? Or would he have become another forgotten name, buried under false accusations and quiet injustice? The answer to that question is what lingers long after the verdict. So the next time you hear a story like Marcus's, ask yourself, will you look away, or will you stand with those fighting to be heard? Because sometimes the difference between injustice winning and truth prevailing is whether someone chooses to listen. What do you think about Marcus's story? Do you believe justice would have been served if he hadn't gathered the evidence, and if Sophia hadn't stepped forward against her father? His fight reminds us how fragile truth can be when power stands against it. If this story moved you, take a moment to like this video. It helps more people hear stories that matter. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next powerful story we share.